Our straight 8 coupe rolled out of Packard's Detroit assembly plant in January of 1938. And after many years of service, it's ready for a rebirth. So join me today on Classic Car Restoration as we dive into the brake system. Welcome to Classic Car Restoration. I'm your host, Mark Lambert. Now, I know the concept of restoring a car like a Packard can be kind of intimidating to some hobbyists, but it really doesn't need to because basically it's simple. If you've been watching our process, you know that I've taken you through each of these systems, component by component. Now, we started with the cooling system, and then we moved on to the ignition. We got all that right, and then most recently we did the fuel system. And when Packard introduced new technology like their air conditioning or hypoid gears, this stuff was often so thoroughly researched that it became the standard of the industry. Now that's the case with our brakes here. You get this tremendous longevity of design. This same basic brake system was used all the way to the muscle car era. So the stuff we're going to learn today applies to almost all the collector cars. So let's take a look at our brake system. When I test drove this car, it stopped nice and straight, but the pedal was mushy, and I suspect we've got a master cylinder problem. And look, we've got a torn master cylinder boot and, yep, brake fluid. So it flunks the test. We're going to have to attend to that. Now, the brake lines, on the other hand, look really good. They're good and solid. But if you've got brake lines that look anything like this, it's critically important that you replace them because this is a single action unit. That means that if you lose one brake line anywhere in the system, your whole system goes down. So make sure you look at that. Now, the brake hoses also on our car look fairly fresh. This is a bad brake hose, and this is a very important thing to check on any car. See that? When I flex that all the way, I can see some very, very small cracks in there. That means that hose has been shot for a while. This is a brand new brake hose. See the difference? That's what ours look like. Nice and crack-free and supple. And when we bleed this system, I predict we're going to get a nice bleed after we rebuild that master cylinder. Now, the next thing to do is pull off these tires. And look at these things. These are our hot rod tires because we sent our original wheels and tires out. The wheels are going to get blasted, and then we'll pinstripe them, and we'll, of course, replace the tires. So let's take this off so we can check our wheel cylinder. Now we can pull this brake drum off. Good, this is promising so far. I don't see a lot of fluid. If I did, there'd be a problem. But let's peel this back and check this wheel cylinder. All right, that is nice and dry. That's what I want to see. And while we're in here, look at this. Look at all the meat left on that lead shoe. That means we've got plenty of time left on that. We'll check the other wheels, and now it's time to pull this master cylinder. We know we've got to go in there. So let's start with the electrical leads, and then we'll take the hydraulics off. Now, we've got to catch our hydraulic fluid, and I'm going to break this big 3/4 free. Now, let's get the master cylinder loose. Okay, that's loose enough. Now, let's pull the rest of our hydraulics off. Okay, there's a couple of little special washers here that I want to catch too. There's one of them. Good, got it. Now there's our brake light switch and our main washer. And then there's another little washer back here. So don't lose those. All right, that's good and loose. 2 more bolts and we can pull it out. There we go. There's the other bottom one, and there's the top one. Okay, we're free, and I'm going to push these hydraulic lines down just real gently and walk this out. You see our pedal fell there because we've got no tension on it. Okay. All right, there it is, our master brake cylinder. Now, when we come back, I'll clean this up and rebuild it and show you a few tricks along the way, too. So join me for that on Classic Car Restoration. When we come back, I'll clean and rebuild our master brake cylinder. Welcome back to Classic Car Restoration. Now, we've removed our master cylinder, so now it's time to disassemble it. Get it chucked up in the vise, and we'll pull this boot off. There it is. Now, let's drain the fluid. Look at that stuff. That doesn't surprise me that much because this is a long-term storage car, and that stuff just turns to varnish. Now, let's pop this cylinder apart. Right there. We'll get that later. Now, you see how that just sprung right out of me? Look at this thing. It's been many years since it was rebuilt. All right, that's the main piston. There's the main seal. And there's a spring down here. There it is. Now, I'm being assisted today by restoration expert Keller Wallace. And while Keller cleans that up, I want to show you these things.
Be back in a minute, Mark.
All right. Now, when Keller brings that back, if it looks anything like this guy, we're in trouble. Because when we hone it with this tool, this just cleans up the bore. No amount of this work will save this cylinder. Look at the pitting in it. Now, the only alternative in this case is re-sleeving. Now, Apple Hydraulic did this for us. They took this brass sleeve and bored this bore out dimensionally so they could insert the sleeve, which brings us back to original 1-inch standard bore. And then we just rebuild this cylinder and we're good to go. So as soon as that's cleaned up, let's give it a hone and see what happens.
Here you go, Mark. It's all cleaned up.
All right, thanks, Keller. All right, let's see what we've got here. We're going to clean this bore up. And to do that, I want to use this brake hone tool. I'm going to spin it in there real easily, and these little stones will cut the bore, and that'll show us whether we've got any pitting or not. First, let's put a little lube on it. This is just brake fluid. Okay, I'm going to go kind of fast at first, and I want to keep my stone moving because in the end I want to end up with a crosshatch pattern that you'd have on like a cylinder bore in an engine. A little more fluid. Okay, I'm going to do my final cut. I'm going to spin this slowly and move it up and down quickly. That'll give me about a 45-degree crosshatch. I'm going to feel this. All right, all the rust is gone. There are no ridges. Everything feels good so far. All right, we're ready to rebuild it. Here is our rebuild kit. Now, you can get these for about $25 at Max Merit. Lubricate the bore with brake fluid and then insert the valve seat and gently walk it all the way down using a punch or rod. And now I'm going to assemble my bleed back valve on the end of the spring like that. I like to use brake fluid on everything. Just keep it really well lubed. There's that. Good. Next is the main cup seal with the protective brass washer built right into the end. That meets up with the sweep seal. Again, lubricate the seal and then carefully install it. Now, if that hangs up or binds, I'm in trouble. I've got to start over. Good. This is essentially a sweep seal. It just goes in at the end of the bore to sweep out any kind of residue that gets past that main seal. And it has to go straight in or you'll bind it. Oh, that's feeling good. Excellent. Same deal on this. We've got to walk this around the end of this bore or we'll bend it back. Now, this is where this tool comes in real handy. All right. I use a tapered punch to add the top washer, and I install the clip that holds it into place. There's that one. Good. Then the cap and washer go back on. We'll leave the cap loose so we can fill it with brake fluid after we install it. Let's put this boot on. Good. Now we're ready to reinstall, and we'll do that when we come back. Plus, I'll show you how to bend some brake lines, so join me. When we return, we'll continue with our brake work and install our rebuilt master cylinder. Welcome back to Classic Car Restoration. Now we're ready to reinstall our master cylinder on our 38 Packard Coupe. But I want you to remember, this is the most important system on the car, but don't let that intimidate you because brakes, more than any other system, will tell you if there's a problem. You'll have a soft pedal, you'll have a leak here and there. So if we made a mistake on the bench, it's going to tell us. Now we're ready to reinstall our cylinder. First, we fit our plunger rod right into the boot. Good. Now, this is a little bit tricky because this bottom one is blind. I'm going to fish it through the bracket first. Good. Now let's get the top one so we can get a good position on the third one. That's easy. And this one's a little easier to see. All right, I'm just walking them in, and I'm going to leave them finger loose for now. Here's our main washer. I'm going to put that through the banjo fitting, and then I'm going to fit this as it goes through, like this. Try to get this the first time here. All right, there it is. Tighten the hydraulic fitting down just enough to crush the washers. If you have a weep, you can always go back later and tighten it more. To secure the master cylinder, tighten these mounting bolts evenly to about 30 pounds of torque. Here's our feed wire. Be careful because on some cars this is hot all the time. Don't ground it, you could blow a fuse. There it is. That's good. And here is our receiving wire. This goes back to the brake lights. Now there's one last thing. I want to slip that dust boot up over the feed rod. Good. Now that completes the installation of our master cylinder. So let's talk about brake lines for just a minute. If you need to replace your brake lines, you don't have to go with an expensive custom-made system from a restoration house. You can save yourself a lot of money and just go to your local auto parts store and buy this stuff for about $1 a foot and bend it and flare it yourself. And I'll show you how here. First, I want you to notice this little inverted flare nut. There's a big one and a small one. Now the small ones are the ones we want to use on the 1930s cars. So let's take this one off when we cut this tubing and replace it with a short original. And then our car is really correct. First, let's cut this. This is my tubing cutter. And I'm going to seat this line right in the groove between the two rollers. Spin the tubing cutter around the line and tighten it as you go. There it is, right there. Now, we've got a good clean brake, and we're ready to flare. Before flaring the end, install the new short nut thread out. This is a brake line flaring tool, and it's got all these different sizes. I've got it set on 1/4 inch because that's what we're using. And I just want a little bit there showing. Clamp down on it so I can flare it. Then I'm going to turn this around. And that cone is going to be driven down into the end of that line and make a flare. Just do it nice and smoothly, no jerky actions. And you'll know when it bottoms out. Okay, it's about to, right there. Now we'll back it off and release it. Now look at that. That's a nice flare. And our inverted flare nut can pull up right to it. Now this is just a little universal bending tool. It goes from 3/16 up to about 3/8. We're going to use 1/4 inch. Now watch how I draw this around. Nice and gentle. Just like that, keeping it in the groove. See that? I could bend all the way around to 180 degrees. And if I make a mistake, very gently, I can back it off a little bit. Now there's a nice little 90, and that could fit right there. Now remember, all this works for fuel lines too. So for more details, you can visit the website at DIYnetwork.com. During the break, we're going to reinstall the brake drum, put the wheel back on, and then when we come back, we'll fill the system with fluid, we'll bleed it, and then we'll adjust it. So join me. Next, we'll bleed the brakes and complete the brake system restoration. Welcome back to Classic Car Restoration. Now we're ready to bleed our brake system. And to do that, I want you to always use fresh brake fluid from a sealed container. And don't agitate this because it just put more air into the system. Just gently fill this reservoir. I'm going to fill it up to the threads. Try not to drip any on the paint. This stuff will eat up paint, so wipe it off if you drip it on paint. All right, let's go to the bleeder valve. Oh, now look at this. This will look familiar to you pre-war car guys. This is a pre-war bleeder valve. This has its original valve on it. In the old days, they would just take this screw off, and then the stuff would just bleed out all over the floor. Sometimes you can put a little adapter on there and catch it, but it was a hassle. Today, we use this kind of bleeder valve because then we can conveniently hook the hose to it. And that way, we catch all our fluid and we can see all the air coming through the system and we know when it's purged of all the air. So let's run with this one. But we'll save these original ones and keep them with the car. Somebody down the line will thank us for that. Okay, I'm going to leave this just a bit loose right there, and I'll hook my line to it. Now, the proper procedure for bleeding a car is starting with the wheel farthest from the master cylinder. So on that car and most others, that's the rear right. And then we work closer to the cylinder, the rear left, the front right, and this is the last one we do. So let's bleed this. Now, I want you to notice the quality or the lack of quality of the fluid that's coming out of this thing. I'm just taking slow, even strokes on this thing. See the dirty fluid starting to come through? Okay, I'm going to check my level because if I get too low and it draws air, I have to start all over again. Refill the master cylinder with brake fluid as necessary until the fluid runs clear without any air bubbles. Just nice, even strokes. I'm going to pause at the top of each stroke just for a minute to let the cylinder refill. Okay, that's good. Now, all the air is out of that system. So we'll take this free and immediately tighten this bleeder screw. And then we can go ahead and snug it on down. Good. That's tight. Now we're ready to adjust our brake shoes. And we do that with this simple little tool called a brake spoon. And that fits right in this little window here. Now there should be some sort of cover on that window. And here are the two types. Again, we have a pre-war type, and save these if you have them. They're rare. But run with these. This is a neoprene plug, and it keeps all the road dirt out from the brake assembly. So let's go ahead and adjust this. Right now I've got no contact. I want to go ahead and fit my spoon and then go up. You can hear it starting to contact. I'm moving a star wheel in here, just 1 or 2 notches at a time. You can hear the drag there, but it's not quite enough. Now what I want is just a gentle, even drag on this thing all the way around, and then after I push it and I lift my hand, I only want about 1 full rotation. Hear the drag? Good. That's what we want. Now let's plug our little hole. Good. Now we're ready to put some pressure on our pedal and test this system for any kind of leaks. All right, that's exactly what I want. A short travel and then a good firm pedal. I'm pushing this as hard as I can. Okay. Now that's imperative. You want to put this system under the most amount of pressure you can muster because that way we'll check for leaks. Now if we have any leaks here at all, we'll tighten them up. Good, good and dry. Let's check our bleeder. All right, that's nice and dry. Now, we've covered this whole brake system in a single afternoon. We've spent very little money because we did it ourselves, and we know it's done right. So now we're ready to tackle the steering system on our 38 Packard Coupe, and we'll do that next time on Classic Car Restoration.